Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're just going to wait a few moments while we let folks filter into the webinar on this beautiful, beautiful Tuesday morning if you're with us live. But if you're watching this content online, it could be anytime, anywhere. But no, we're very excited to be talking with you today. Um, Please, everyone, enjoy the starting slide. Get excited for our chat today. Empowered by empathy, how following your heart can lead to fulfillment and success. With Amanda. How are you doing, Amanda?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with you guys.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So just a couple of housekeeping items as we start. So if you've been here before, you already know my name is Jenna Quinn, and it's my pleasure as the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement to welcome you all to this edition of our 49er Industry Chat Series. We just need to inform everyone that this session is being recorded. So what this means for you is that this will be available for you on demand at our website, www.csulb.edu/alumni. And so you feel free to watch it again, share it with a friend, share it with a colleague, or anyone you feel might get something out of this. Since this is a webinar format, for those of you who are here with us live today, we encourage you to use the Q&A box to submit your questions to our guest speaker. You don't have to wait until the end. As soon as you have a question, just submit it and we'll make sure it gets answered. And so with that, I'm happy to welcome our guest speaker today, Amanda Thyden. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Yeah, eager to get going and see where this conversation takes us.
Cool. Well, I'm sure people are dying to know more about you. So just reading your bio to start, Amanda is a former nonprofit attorney who practiced healthcare and dependency law before joining the USC Gould School of Law as a career and academic advisor. She graduated CSULB with a double major in international studies and Spanish language and earned her JD from Chapman Fowler School of Law. She deeply values compassion, human connection, and amplifying the voices of underrepresented populations. Once she leaned into the work that made her heart soar, she found success as a nonprofit leader in the anti-trafficking space and as an advisor at a top law school supporting students. She is also active on local nonprofit boards and an engaged mommy to her son. Awesome. Well, I think that I'd love to say, that says it all, but obviously it doesn't. We have a lot to chat about today, Amanda. So let's just get started. Let's start off with a little bit of background about you. Can you tell me about, what led you to CSULB? What was your life like? What were those steps when you were deciding to make CSULB your school of choice?
Yeah. Um, so I am a Long Beach born and raised kid. So I started out at a local elementary school, local middle school, local high school, Lakewood High School, go Lancers. And I feel like when you're from Long Beach, you inevitably go to Cal State Long Beach for activities. I had a lot of friends who did 49er camp. And for me, it was just my parents were both Cal State Long Beach alums. And so we would just go to events. I grew up at the Carpenter Center. I, danced locally. So I performed at the Carpenter Center. We went to the Nutcracker every year. Saw all of like speakers and stuff just kind of growing up. And for me in high school, I was, one of those like high achievers. I was on ASB, did all of that kind of stuff. And so it also gave me even more opportunity to get to local colleges and universities. So for me, I was close with my family. I knew I wanted to stay local. I still did apply around the country, as every high school student does, where you just kind of want to see. And then went to some of the local private universities, did tours and things like that. And just once I started to really understand the kind of the financial implications of different universities, just speaking frankly, I realized that, I knew that I wanted Long Beach to be my home forever. Like that's just, I'm not leaving. We have too great of a city for me to ever want to leave. And I wanted to be able to, like, long term afford life as a college grad. And so for me, there was kind of a comfort in Cal State Long Beach, knowing that it was someplace I had been and loved the environment. They had international studies as a major, which was really exciting for me. And it was something that I knew I could pay for. I worked during college to help cover those bills, and it was doable, which you can't really say about a lot of schools. And so that was kind of my general journey to Cal State Long Beach. I think it's still really true for many students in our area, where we're all looking at our futures. We're all looking at the rates of student loans and things like that. So we want to make sure that if we're taking something out, we can pay it off and like continue growing our lives even after college.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's something that a lot of people consider and a lot of people think about. So, hey, it makes perfect sense to me, and I agree with you. Long Beach is the best, right?
Why would you go anywhere else?
Why?
Yeah.
Why? Well, so when you were a student here, right? So you made Long Beach your school of choice, and we're so glad that you did. But what was your student experience like? I think I heard you say, you worked as a student.
Mm-hmm.
But what else were you involved in? What was your life like? What activities were you involved in?
Yeah. So much like high school, I was very involved at Cal State Long Beach as well. So I helped. I don't remember what it was called. It was some kind of orientation team, like a soar helper, I want to say, and that was really fun each year because you get to help support the new students, and it just kind of reinvigorates you as a college student of like, look how excited they are. Like, I want to remember that. I want to continue being excited too. Like, I'm here to learn and here to grow. And that was one just kind of like fun activity. I was also very involved in ASI, Associated Students Incorporated, and still remain in contact with some of the people that I met through ASI. So I was a senator for the College of Liberal Arts, and so got to just meet a lot of students that way through meetings and learning like what was important to them. One of the things that I really focused on during my time was there was a group of us that wanted to have a smoke-free Long Beach state. And this was in 2009 or 2010. And we really wanted everything to go smoke-free, and students simply weren't there yet. It was still, students were not for it. And so we needed to kind of readjust, pivot. I had to learn how to negotiate, listen to ideas that I absolutely did not agree with, and take those ideas to our Senate and our student body. So it was really, in the moment, a frustrating experience, but I think it's really helped me learn, early on how to listen as opposed to just speaking for, what I want or think is best. So we ended up basically starting with more of an enforcement of the rules, which weren't necessarily being enforced at the time, because this was all kind of going smoke-free was still pretty new. And so anyways, so student government was something. And then I was also involved in the International Studies Student Association. So my the major international studies had just a student group, and we brought in speakers and had events. So that was fantastic for networking and just kind of career development and learning. And then something else that was fantastic, I think, was I got to study abroad while at Cal State Long Beach. And so I studied abroad twice. Completely understand that that is a very fortunate position to be in, and I loved it. So I went to Spain for a semester, and then Taiwan for a summer. And that was fantastic. I can't recommend that enough. There's some financial support that students can find, I know. I think they've expanded that a little bit since I was there, but I think those are kind of my highlights of what I was most eagerly involved in as a student.
Yeah, no, I mean, hey, thanks so much for the smoke-free campus thing, right? Right? Like, it's hard to think, it really wasn't that long ago, but it's something that impacts everyone's day to day. So
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah, I know. But now I take my son there all the time. My husband and I, like I said, we're still local. And so we take my son to campus, and he loves climbing on the trees and all of that. And every time we see no smoking, we're like, yes, that's right. No smoking.
Yeah.
It's so good. So yeah, it's fun.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, everyone's time as a student at the beach eventually comes to an end. And so when yours was coming to an end, right? When you were looking at graduation, what was that next step for you? What was the process of deciding that next step?
Mm-hmm.
And how intentional were you, knowing what you wanted to do?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. And I'm glad with how my path kind of was unclear and pivoted and changed and things, because when I was at Cal State Long Beach, I was pretty sure that I wanted to be a diplomat. My grandfather was a diplomat. I studied international studies and Spanish with the thought that I would go down the diplomat route. And then as I started learning more about it, I learned more and more that a diplomat kind of speaks for the country, not for like their own views. I am rather opinionated. And so even though I had gone through this whole journey of undergrad with that being my goal, by the end of my time, I realized I don't think I can do this. I think it's a fantastic career. I have friends who are diplomats, and I love to visit them around the world. But I learned that, being an outspoken person, I may have challenges that I don't really want to overcome. So I went through a bit of a quarter life crisis in determining kind of what was next. And that was when I just decided I needed to kind of lean into human service. So I've always been, in student government, always tried to engage, always done, beach cleanups or backpack drop-offs for people. And so I decided to kind of, again, stay local. And I ended up doing an internship with the VA at Long Beach. And I did that for about a year and a half, working in a very new department at the time called patient-centered care. And so now that's everywhere. But at the time, it was exceptionally new to be treating patients like people, because doctors would often go into a room and say, kidney failure in bed 1, heart failure in bed 2, and then just go about their day. So I got to, as a new grad, just support this new training and program. And that was, I would say, probably one of the most pivotal decisions for the rest of my career, in just kind of learning that there's a whole career about putting people first. There's so many ways that you can be, an empath or want to serve and still find, success. Still didn't know what that meant, but I knew that like this job was good for me and I liked helping people. So, so I did that to start. That was like a I think it's an 18-month program. And then I moved on to working at a nursing home as their social service designee. It's kind of like a social worker without a social work degree. So you go through training, and it was kind of an extension of patient-centered care, but I got to be the director of it.
And a different population, right?
And a totally different population. Yes. And so that was really neat. And I really enjoyed my time at the nursing home and working kind of in the healthcare system, learning about laws, not at all using my international studies degree, but learning still like the analytical skills that you gain in college. But I did use my Spanish major quite a bit, which was fantastic. And I still think helps me get jobs to this day. And from there, I got really frustrated at how limited non-lawyers were. So families would come to me and say, like, I don't understand my mom's will, or I need clarity about this thing, or, you know, my mom doesn't want to move. Can we force her to move? We want her in another state. And my supervisors would regularly clarify, like, you're not allowed to talk about that. You can only support the family side, like you can support the people, which is great because I love to be a support and like a soft place to land. But I felt frustrated by the fact that they were asking me questions and I wasn't even allowed to try to find the answers because I wasn't a lawyer. So then kind of, you know, pivoted that route once I realized that lawyers really do have a lot of kind of weight and skill that I didn't really understand until that job. But everything for me was kind of really at the end of college, it just kind of became, how can I help the most people? And how can I impact their lives in a way that makes me want to go to work? And that's kind of where I started pivoting then to law, when I realized you have to have a law degree if you want to give legal advice. And I didn't know that.
Novel, right?
Yeah, I know.
Well, so I mean, deciding to go, you'd graduated, you'd been in the workforce for some time, loving what you're doing, but that decision to go back to school, right? How did you know you had to make it, and how was that transition?
Yeah. So like I said, for me, I think I was still kind of trained by just, you know, society generally to, you know, work hard, do your best, make a lot of money. Like that's the goal. And I didn't feel comfortable not following that quite yet. But when I was working in the nursing home and realized you need a law degree for legal advice or to provide legal advice, I transitioned to working at a law firm for a little while just to like make sure that it was going to be interesting to me. And so did that for a little while just to make sure. And then that's when I started studying for the LSAT, thinking about applying to law school and things like that. And for me, I knew I wanted a master's degree because I just enjoy school and I enjoy learning. And each time I looked at master's degrees that were related to, you know, international relations or even a Spanish major, they're great, but they didn't excite me. I don't know what it was, but I just had to be honest with myself that for that kind of financial investment and that kind of time investment, I needed to wait. I couldn't go right after undergrad because nothing felt right. You know, I would look at it and read it and like one or two of the classes would seem cool, but I didn't know where I was going to go from there. And so then I started looking at law schools and at law school curriculum and kind of the paths that lawyers can take. And I just, in the place that I was in at that time, it started really exciting me to think about, you know, talking for a living, doing oral advocacy for a living, really putting my money where my mouth was in terms of wanting to do work for my community and, you know, at the time, like my country, things like that. That's where I was looking. And so that was why I made that decision to go to law school. As I said, though, with Cal State Long Beach, I part of that decision in choosing Cal State Long Beach was finances. And for me, it was the same with law school. So I applied at a lot of different law schools. I'm very glad I got into many law schools, and I ended up choosing a law school that, I loved, was very proud to attend, and gave me the best, I will just say the best financial future in terms of, I didn't have to worry as much about loans. And I think sometimes I think we don't really talk about that enough in, how, unless you're maybe going to a super, super top, school, we just have to think about how it's going to impact us. And if you want to buy a house one day or travel or things like that. So
start a family.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
And then start saving up for, for their college one day. So, so for me, the leap came just in knowing that I wanted to serve people. And once I really started looking at law schools and programs, I realized that was probably going to be the best route to do that. But again, I just didn't know what that meant for me. I just knew I wanted to go and learn how to help people. And so then the transition to law school for me was, I would say the first semester was really intimidating and kind of scary. There were a lot of students who had majored in things like pre-law. And so they knew how to read cases, they knew how to analyze things that I had never heard of, knew nothing about. And so, in my first semester, I did not do fantastic. I did okay, but I was used to really thriving and doing well in school. So it was really hard after this, several year break to go back and then think, to first be hard on myself because I didn't major in pre-law, and then to see that I wasn't going to be top of my class. It was just a really hard mental kind of challenge to overcome. And then, so after that, I went and cried to a bunch of professors who told me I was making a big deal about nothing and I could be fine and whatever. And then sought a lot of advice from other students and how I should kind of change how I was studying, and learned that law school studying is very, very different than undergrad studying. It's just kind of a different way of thinking, and it really challenges kind of anybody who's a procrastinator. You can't really procrastinate your way through law school. And so once I got some advice from people and professors and pivoted how I was preparing, then I was able to really thrive and, find the success that I was hoping for in law school. And so I was able to, join the law review and do moot court and all of those kind of like pinnacle law school experiences. And I got to travel to do all different kinds of competitions for negotiations and mediation. And again, everything that I was kind of drawn to was really non-adversarial dispute resolution. Everything was kind of about peace building, serving people, having the least amount of conflict, or resolving conflict as easily as possible for people, and kind of preserving their emotional well-being. But the transition itself was not the easiest for me, just having very high expectations for myself. And then once I was able to figure it out and kind of realize that it's 3 years, just devote yourself to this full time for 3 years, and then you can go do, anything else that you want to do. Once I kind of accepted that, then I was able to do much better in the last 2 years.
Yeah, no, and I think that's great advice, right? Like cutting yourself some slack and readjusting expectations, because things aren't exactly, things don't always exactly happen the way we think or imagine them to. So, absolutely great advice. But you got through it. You got through the 2 more years, and then it was time to be a lawyer. I mean, what was that transition like? And what was your first job?
Yeah. So my first lawyer job after, my first job after was still working at my law school. Again, I loved doing mediation, and we worked in a juvenile hall where we would help incarcerated youth learn problem solving skills, because many people just simply don't learn problem solving skills as kids, and so they resolve issues with their fists, and then they end up in really difficult situations. So I loved it so much. I knew that I just didn't feel quite done with it, so I stayed on a little bit and helped run that program for a short stint, and it was wonderful, and I loved continuing to mediate and do all of that work. And then after that, I transitioned to a legal position as a lawyer at the Children's Law Center. And so that was doing kind of all of the adversarial type law that I never thought I would do. But again, for me, it was all about how can I serve people? How can I use my voice to advocate for some kind of underrepresented population? And the Children's Law Center is specifically an LA-based nonprofit organization that represents children in the foster system. And so there's an attorney for the county that does all of the kind of oversight. There's an attorney for parents, and then there's an attorney for the children. And so I represented the kids in court. And so my clients were all kids who had allegedly suffered some kind of an abuse from somebody. And that work made my heart absolutely soar. I was specifically placed in an anti-trafficking courtroom. It was one of the first of its kind, where there was a very holistic approach. So it wasn't just, he said, she said, okay, this is what you have to do. Now get out of my courtroom. Everything was, trauma informed. Everybody was really, really patient. Everybody cared what the kids were going through and wanted them to succeed. And so even though it wasn't exactly what I thought I would be doing after, it felt so right to be standing in front of a judge and speaking the words that these kids didn't know how to articulate for themselves. And so it was extremely uncomfortable for me because I was used to mediations, which were very, calm and confidential. And this just shoved me into the front of a courtroom, in these really contentious situations. And it just showed me more of what I was capable of, but didn't know it. And that I think also really helped my career, because I didn't know that I could do that. And from there, after a fantastic experience, I was asked to join Chalk Children's Hospital, assisting with one of their nonprofits that did a simple way of explaining it is just like healthcare rights for kids who were turning 18, and they had severe disabilities in one form or another, and a lot of undocumented families that couldn't afford attorney services. And so I got to go do that. We used to charge them $30, and then they got, everything they needed. And for me, it was at the Children's Law Center when I was pushed into, the anti-trafficking courtroom, lots of trials, things like that. While I loved the work, I started to realize what trauma fatigue was. I started to realize that, self-care has to be a thing, and it can't just be something that's, popular and we talk about, that I really needed to do it. And so once I realized I don't think I could do that long term, I would have had to build walls around like my heart and my mind that I didn't want to build. I like being an empath. I like crying when things make me sad.
Yeah.
And you can't really do that if that's your job.
Yeah.
And
If
so
your heart's soaring, how are you going to build a box around it, right?
Totally, exactly. And so I didn't feel like I could do that long term. And then so went over to Chalk and did work that was still doing good, still cried on the regular with my clients, still felt, you know, really good, but it wasn't quite the same constant tug. And, you know, just, it made more sense for me and the balance that I needed. And gave me just more, also just a little bit more free time, and free mental space.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's something that, you know, I think a lot of people have questions about, you know, like when you're doing that kind of work, how do you have free time? Like
Mm-hmm.
how do you do that self-care, right? You mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's something that you have to do and not just a pop cultural thing that you talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But like from your experiences, you know,
Mm-hmm.
when you were in that, like how did you successfully do that?
Yeah. So I was really fortunate that at the Children's Law Center, they would have seminars and programs to encourage us to take mental health days as needed. You don't have to say that, you know, you can still call it a sick day, but if your mind is not well, then you're not going to be the best advocate. And I think that's true for anybody. It's not just lawyers by any means. You know, if you're not mentally ready to work, call it a form of sickness, call it whatever you want, call it a personal day, but you need to be able to take those days. And so that was one of the things that we really focused on, was being sure to take that time. I was not as good as I think I am now in terms of prioritizing self-care. I think that's why one of the reasons I burned out. I wanted it too badly. You know, I just wanted to help as many kids as I could. And so I did work through lunch, and I did work long hours, and I did work weekends to, you know, get my cross-examination ready and have, you know, closing arguments ready. And so in terms of what I did then, I don't think I have any good advice because I didn't do it. But in terms of what I do now and what I did after that job, when the advice started to really click, it's frequent walk breaks for me during the day. That's just a personal thing that helps me. I cannot sit at a desk for 8 hours straight. I get antsy and grouchy and totally get Zoom fatigue from so many meetings. And so now I take at least 2 walks a day. You know, legally we're entitled to multiple breaks during a day, you know, 15 minutes, and then you get your lunch break at a minimum. And so mine just include like walking. I always say I have to get my wiggles out the same way that we, you know, say that to the kids, but it's true. Like you still get wiggles when you sit for too long. And then the other thing is, I think just I talk to my friends and I vent pretty regularly, which I don't think we identify as a form of self-care, but it is. That if I have somebody who I don't work with, who I can just text and say, like, I've had a terrible day. This is really annoying. I know it's not really terrible, but I just need to vent. That's totally a form of self-care and help. So I will readily admit that I do that. And then just I make my weekends just for me, and my evenings are just for me. So I know a lot of people are not in a financial position where they could turn down overtime, but I am. And so I do not work overtime. If I'm asked to work overtime, I'm not available. If I am asked to work on a weekend, I'm not available. My family time and my me time is, like, for lack of a better word, sacred. And I just don't compromise. And so my colleagues know. I try to bring it up. You know, if somebody asks for an interesting fact, I'm like, I don't do overtime. That's the neat thing about me. So don't ask me. But it's helpful to talk about it and destigmatize. Like, I'm not going to work insane hours because I also have a life. Like you know, work is not my only thing. And that I would say is my biggest form of self-care.
I honestly, I think you struck a nerve with this one. We have a question from the audience.
Yeah.
And they're saying, do you have any advice on upholding those boundaries and taking personal days when it's your boss that's always working late and creating that environment?
Yeah, I think being honest and setting realistic expectations. So if your boss is constantly working overtime, that's fine. They don't have to enforce the same boundaries that you do. But I think whether it's at performance review time or just if you have regular check-ins, I think it's okay. If you're being asked to work overtime, then you can always say no. If you're being told that you need to work overtime, I think that's when it's really important to have one of those conversations about what is the expectation for my hours? What is the expectation for this or that? I can't necessarily complete the sentence for you, but I think understanding expectations and having them in writing, right? So you can ask a question during a meeting of your boss of, what is the expectation for my hours? I thought it was typically 9 to 5. It seems like we're taking on a lot of new tasks where there might be more. Is this a short-term thing? Is this longer term? Is this a shifting expectation? There's so many different ways that you can have that conversation. So have it with your boss and then follow it up with an email summarizing, I'm so glad we had this conversation. I'm glad we were able to, understand what my work is going to look like moving forward. Thank you so much for sharing that. My work schedule is going to continue to be 9 to 5 or something like that. And then in terms of personal days, I think you don't have to share why you're taking them. Just take the day. I think when I say be honest and things like that, I mean in terms of setting expectations and setting boundaries. I do not think you have to overshare with a supervisor. I am a chronic oversharer, and yet I still, if I'm taking a mental health day, it's just a day off. I don't have to tell everybody that I'm overwhelmed or need a day to sit with my kid because I missed him. I just take the day. And it's nobody's right to know why you're taking a day or what you're doing. So it's just a day. And if they ask what you're doing, you can just say you're having a day off, period. You don't have to give all of that detail. It's weird because we feel like we owe it to people, but we really don't.
Yeah. No, I definitely hear you. And I think that's great advice. And honestly, I'm going to tell people my lawyer said no.
Yeah. None of this is legal advice. No.
Well, so getting back to that, right? Like, so, you are right now an advisor, right?
Right.
At USC. So what I was talking about transitions, how did that come to be? And and how did you decide that was the right move for you?
Yeah. So much like each of the transitions that I've said, I just started really prioritizing myself and my own interests. So I started getting, again, an issue with me. I started getting burnt out because I was putting in too many hours and kind of investing too much of my heart in my clients, which I started to realize might just be a me problem. And I either had to find ways, again, to build boundaries better or really take a look at, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And what is my favorite part of my job? And I realized as much as I love the success in court, because I'm extremely competitive, and as much as I love my clients being so grateful and hugging and all of that, it was equally as rewarding as draining. And that was not sustainable for me. And so I took a really hard look at just what continually gave me happiness in that job. And it was working with law students. I had a law clerk program that I was able to build and run. And so we hired students each semester, trained them, got to see them, support clients in court. I set up a whole curriculum for them and met with them, very regularly to talk about their career goals, how I could help them achieve that, how our organization could help support them. And it kind of blew my mind when I was honest with myself about that being my favorite part, because I had just invested, 3 years in law school, had this other job in court. I was in court again and I was doing, all of this other stuff. But really, that's what I loved. I loved being people's cheerleader. And so I was looking at positions just to feel it out and see. And this one opened up at a law school. And the whole role, I call myself like a cheerleader for our students, because that's what so much of being a career and academic advisor is. It's being kind of a safe place cheerleader. So they come, might not know, everything they want to do, but they have big picture goals. And so we'll talk about how to achieve that. We talk about, networking and finding fulfillment. And I'm constantly sharing with students about how, for me, empathy, I don't view it as a weakness. And I really view it as one of my best strengths that has gotten me here to a place where now I do have work-life balance. I am able to take walks during the day. I don't bring home any work, because even though I work from home some days, I don't take my work home, because I don't have clients that are, might get kicked out of the country if I fail. And I learned that, if I'm being honest, that's just not work that I can do. It's not sustainable for me. And so, but it allowed me to get to this place where now I love being their cheerleader. I love working with students every day. I love that my job is networking and meeting people. And I love that I still practice all of my oral advocacy skills, but I do it for presentations to students and teaching them, these skills on their own. So I would not say that any of it was a waste. Law school was still fantastic. And even though we only have a couple minutes, I will also say all of that helped me in kind of community engagement as well, because now I serve, as we said very briefly initially, I serve on many nonprofit boards, and people, I sit on an anti-trafficking board. I sit on like a motherhood support nonprofit. And I think I wouldn't have felt comfortable with my voice and my advocacy and my ability to engage had I not had all of these prior experiences. So yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think the thing that strikes me about your career path, right, is that, you may not be in the courtroom anymore, but you're there helping students, dozens, hundreds, thousands of students make it into the courtroom, make it to
Yeah.
those families, and having that
Right.
impact on just a generation of future lawyers. So I guess one of my closing questions to you is, for those students and for the students that you interact with every day, and for our students who are, starting their own career path and their own career journey, what's the thing that you try to impart on students the most, or what's the best piece of advice that you try and give out in your position?
Yeah. So I'll give practical advice and then feeling advice.
Sure.
So practically, I would say that creating a network and meeting people is the best way to get employed, period. Having a great resume is fantastic. Having a great cover letter is really helpful. Being active on LinkedIn is great, but you don't need any of those things if you know the right person and talk to them at the right time. Because if they know you and you ask the right questions or, attend certain events with them, they will simply hire you without needing all of that other documentation. And college is the prime time to attend events, get to know people. If you attend an event, email the speaker after to let them know that you appreciated what they said, ask for a meeting with them. You can use your status as a student to benefit you. Everybody wants to help a student. So practically speaking, use that and network. In terms of kind of feeling mushy advice, I would say just don't be afraid of change, because I am very type A. I like a plan. I like to know my plan. And yet I think I am 1,000% happier now, not as a diplomat and as, a USC Gould School of Law advisor who also sits on local nonprofit boards, who gets to go visit Cal State Long Beach whenever she wants because she has free time. I'm so much happier in this role than if I had been a diplomat. And that's all because I was able to pivot and follow what excited me and accepted these changes. And I am in love with my life and how it ended up. So I think if we can just understand that change happens and we don't necessarily have everything figured out right after college, like that's okay.
Yeah. Truly amazing, truly impactful messaging here, Amanda. I can't thank you enough for your time, and I think that everyone else here and everyone watching can attest to that being pretty impactful. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So right now we're putting up our slide. If you want to get in touch with CSULB alumni, get in contact with us, get involved, get engaged. This is where you can find us. But Amanda, if people still have questions for you or want to reach out to you to continue this or get your advice or just know more about you and your journey, how can they find you?
Yeah. So I would say let's just connect on LinkedIn. A part of my job is being there. So I'm there just about every day. And I would love to connect and learn and see, what's next for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you to everyone who's joined us here today. We appreciate you, and we hope to see you again at the next edition of our 49er Industry Chat. Amanda, if you could stay on while everyone else filters out. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.